Resident Evil has spent 28 years documenting some of the cruelest deaths in gaming history. Not the quick ones, the merciful headshots or instant decapitations, but the prolonged horrors where victims stayed conscious through weeks, years, even decades of agony. Deaths where people documented their own transformations, wrote goodbye letters while starving in sealed rooms, or wore their mother's face for 31 years searching for her. That's why today I'm ranking the 8 most agonizing deaths in Resident Evil history, from brutal to absolutely insane, starting with the man who literally wrote through his own transformation, the Keeper. The Keeper's Diary is the most famous document in survival horror history, and after 28 years of files across the entire franchise, it remains the only death where you watch someone's consciousness dissolve through their own handwriting in real time. The Keeper worked at the Arklay Research Facility as an animal handler. He had friends, played poker with colleagues named Scott and Alias, wore a hazmat suit to work every day. On May 9th, 1998, everything was normal. On May 11th, James Marcus Queen Leach caused a T-virus leak in the facility. By May 14th, the Keeper noticed a strange rash on his arm. By May 16th, he's scratching at it and a piece of rotten flesh drops off his body. He is confused, but not yet panicking. May 19th, his diary entry reads like a child wrote it. Fever gone, but itchy. Today hungry and eat doggy food. His grammar is collapsing. His higher brain functions are shutting down. But then May 21st arrives. His entry that day contains exactly 14 words. Itchy, itchy Scott came ugly face, so killed him. Tasty. Scott was the security guard he played poker with 12 days earlier. The Keeper murdered him, and then he ate him. The final entry is undated, barely legible, just 4 characters scratched into the page. 4//itchy tasty. In the Japanese version, players documented how the kanji characters themselves degrade into incomplete strokes as his motor control fails. His trying to write, but his hands can't form the shapes anymore. Here's what makes this absolutely brutal. The T-virus typically kills infected subjects within 72 hours of exposure. The Keeper survived for 12 days. Research files from the Arklay lab confirm most staff died in under a week. He outlasted every single one of them. That's not luck. That's extended suffering. His body fought the virus long enough to document every stage of cognitive collapse, physical rot, and the moment he transitioned from victim to monster. The diary is found in the researcher's bedroom on the mansion's first floor. After you read it, a zombie bursts from the wardrobe directly behind you. That's not just atmospheric placement. That zombie is the Keeper. The man whose death you just read about in his own words is the creature trying to kill you 3 seconds later. Players have documented this across 3 different games: Resident Evil, 1996, Remake 2002, RE5S Lost in Nightmares, DLC. Every single version keeps the diary identical because Capcom knows it's perfect. 12 days of a man writing his way into monstrosity. 12 days where he stayed aware enough to document it, but couldn't stop it. That's what earns the Keeper the opening slot on this list. But if 12 days of conscious transformation seems horrific, wait until you learn about the teenager who stayed aware while trapped inside a monster's body, Steve Burnside. Steve Burnside was 17 years old when he experienced the single worst moment of psychological horror in Code Veronica. And after Claire Redfield refuses to fight back against him, he breaks through viral mind control through pure willpower, only to die seconds later confessing his love. Steve was a prisoner on Rockford Island. His father sold Umbrella secrets to a rival corporation, and both of them got locked up as punishment. When the T. Veronica outbreak hits the island, Steve watches his father transform into a zombie. Then he's forced to shoot him. That's his introduction. Dead father, no family, trapped on an island full of bioweapons. He meets Claire during the chaos and they escape together to the Antarctic Umbrella facility. He develops genuine feelings for her. She's the first person who's treated him like a human being in months. But then Alexia Ashford captures him. Alexia chains Steve up in the Antarctic lab and injects him with the T. Veronica virus as a control experiment. She's testing whether teenagers can survive the mutation without the 15-year cryogenic preparation period she used on herself. His body mutates into a massive green humanoid wielding a ceremonial gold axe. Muscles bulge through torn skin. His face elongates into something barely recognizable. And Alexia sends him to kill Claire. He attacks. Claire runs through the facility, refusing to fight back, screaming his name, trying to reach whatever's left of him inside that body, his swinging the axe with enough force to cleave stone pillars. No recognition, no hesitation. Alexia's tentacle moves to impale Claire from behind. Steve stops mid-swing. He turns. He severs the tentacle with the axe and collapses. Another tentacle immediately impales him through the abdomen. He reverts to human form in Claire's arms, bleeding out, and tells her he was glad to have met her. Then he confesses his love. Those are his last words. Here's what breaks this wide open. Steve was conscious inside the monster the entire time. He heard Claire screaming his name. He felt his body attacking her. He was fighting an internal war against a virus rewriting his nervous system, and he couldn't stop himself until the exact moment it mattered most. Then the virus let him have 30 seconds of control before killing him. That's not a merciful death. That's psychological torture with a countdown timer. Wesker's team later recovered Steve's body to extract the T. Veronica sample, meaning even his corpse became Umbrella property. But at least Steve's suffering lasted minutes. Unlike the cameraman who spent weeks being tortured in every way one psychopath could imagine. Clancy Jarvis. Clancy Jarvis is the only playable character in Resident Evil 7 who canonically dies. And his death wasn't quick or accidental. It was the culmination of weeks of escalating torture designed by Lucas Baker as entertainment. Clancy worked as a cameraman for the Sewer Gators, a paranormal investigation TV show. On June 1st, 2017, the crew explored the abandoned Baker guest house in Dulvey, Louisiana. Clancy found his producer Andre impaled on a pipe with his face mutilated, propped up to look alive. Their presenter Pete got stabbed through the chest by Mia Winters. Jack Baker captured Clancy as the camera hit the ground. That's when the torture began. Stage 1 was the Nightmare Gauntlet. Jack forced Clancy to survive waves of molded creatures and repeated attacks from Jack himself in the processing area until 5 in the morning. Pure endurance horror. The goal wasn't to kill him. The goal was to terrorize him over and over and see how long he'd last. Stage 2 was bedroom captivity. Marguerite Baker strapped Clancy to a bed and served him human entrails as food. If he disturbed anything while trying to escape, she'd return and vomit live insects directly into his face as punishment. 3 failures meant death. Stage 3 was Lucas's card game. Lucas forced Clancy and another captive named Hoffman to play modified blackjack, where the loser's fingers got severed by a guillotine device. Clancy won. Hoffman died. Then Lucas played against Clancy using Hoffman's corpse as a puppet. Clancy won again. Lucas refused to honor the deal, but Stage 4 was the masterpiece. Lucas built an entire room rigged as a puzzle trap and told Clancy it took him weeks to finish. The solution required placing a candle on a birthday cake to unlock the exit. Completing the puzzle spilled oil across the floor. When the candle ignited, Clancy realized too late he was covered in oil. The room erupted in flames. He sprinted to the sprinkler valve. It broke off in his hands. Lucas had sabotaged it. The exit was blocked. Clancy burned alive screaming while Lucas watched on camera. Then Lucas entered the room, looked at the charred corpse, and wished it a cheerful happy birthday. Clancy endured captivity, force-feeding, insect torture, finger amputation, psychological games, and death by immolation across weeks of sustained horror. His suffering literally saved Ethan Winters later. Ethan watched the happy birthday tape and learned how to solve the puzzle without triggering the oil trap. But at least Clancy's ordeal had an ending, unlike the architect who starved inside his own creation, searching for an exit that never existed. George Trevor. George Trevor wasn't killed by a virus or a monster. He was killed by architecture, starvation, and the realization that his masterpiece was always designed to be his coffin. George was a renowned New York architect hired by Oswell Spencer to design the Spencer Mansion in the Arklay Mountains. Spencer wanted elaborate puzzles, hidden passages, secret rooms. George delivered exactly that. A labyrinthine mansion where every door could be a trap, and every room could rearrange itself through mechanical systems. When construction finished in 1967, Spencer invited George to stay as a guest. Spencer told him his wife Jessica and daughter Lisa had left to visit a sick relative. That was a lie. Both were being experimented on in laboratories directly beneath George's feet. George's diary starts November 13, 1967, as exploring the mansion trying to understand why he can't leave. November 24th, he writes that 11 days have passed and he's trapped. He overhears men in lab coats talking and realizes the truth. There are only 2 people who know every secret of this mansion, Spencer Spencer and himself. If they kill him, Spencer becomes the only person alive who knows how it works. November 29th, he finds a familiar high-heeled shoe, Jessica's shoe. He understands his family might share his fate, but then November 30th arrives. George writes that he hasn't had food or water for several days. He's wandering the mansion he designed, searching for exits he knows exist, unable to find any of them. The puzzles he created with pride have become inescapable traps. His own architectural genius is killing him. December comes and his handwriting deteriorates. The final entry is dated November 31st. That date doesn't exist. His mind has broken. In that final entry, George describes finding a grave in a hidden room. The name engraved on the stone is his own. Not recently carved, deeply engraved, professional work. He writes, "At that instant, it all became clear to me. Those bastards knew from the beginning that I'd die here and I fell right into their trap." His last words are an apology to Jessica and Lisa for getting them involved through his ego. Spencer commissioned that gravestone before George ever arrived at the mansion. The traps weren't security features. They were execution mechanisms. George died designing his own tomb without realizing it until he found his name already carved in stone. Players who read Trevor's diary before finding the Keeper's diary realized something horrifying. George died in late 1967. His daughter Lisa was locked in the basement and experimented on for 31 years after that. She outlived her father by 3 decades and never knew he was dead. But if dying of starvation in your own creation seems brutal, wait until you learn about the experiment where researchers hammered a metal rod into a man's brain for humanitarian reasons. Experiment Alpha. The Experiment Alpha log from Resident Evil Dead Aim contains the single most disturbing sentence ever written in a Capcom file, and after reading 41 days of clinical surgical torture, you realize the researchers weren't monsters. They genuinely believed they were being humane. The subject was a condemned criminal designated Alpha. Umbrella acquired him for T-virus experimentation aboard a research vessel. The log opens with chilling observation. He is not exactly aware of what is going to happen to him. However, he seems to be very frightened. Alpha knew something terrible was coming. He just didn't know what. Day 1 of the experiment. The researchers write, "We hammered a metal rod into the subject's frontal lobe in order to alleviate some of the pain. This was done only for humanitarian reasons. They lobotomized him with a hammered metal rod. They called it humanitarian. That framing, that complete detachment from what they're actually doing, defines the entire 41 days. Day 4. They remove both eyeballs to observe reactions to external stimulation. Alpha is now blind, lobotomized, and being studied for how his remaining senses adapt to the loss. Day 14, muscle booster administered. The log confirms unusual muscle development and drastic weight gain. The virus is reshaping his body into something massive while he's conscious enough to experience it. But then day 36 reveals something the researchers didn't expect. Removing the eyeballs caused massively enhanced hearing. Alpha can now recognize exactly where sounds originate and calculate their precise distance. His body compensated for the lost sense by amplifying another to superhuman levels. The researchers document this with fascination. No concern, no acknowledgement that they created this condition by surgically blinding him. Just clinical notes about unexpected sensory evolution. Day 41. The experiment is suspended. Alpha escapes. The resulting creature, designated Pluto, is a massive eyeless humanoid with a grotesquely oversized left hand who hunts purely by sound. In-game, players must use silenced weapons and walk slowly, or Pluto detects them from across entire rooms. His enhanced hearing isn't a superpower. It's the biological consequence of having his eyes surgically removed while researchers took notes. What makes Alpha's death worse than entries below it is the methodical surgical nature of the torture. This wasn't a virus running its course. This was researchers making deliberate choices every single day for 41 days, hammering rods into brains, removing eyes, injecting muscle boosters, documenting every stage with the detached language of a medical journal. The log explicitly states Alpha was initially conscious and frightened. The lobotomy happened because he was screaming. They heard him screaming and decided the humanitarian solution was brain damage. But at least Alpha's suffering lasted weeks. Unlike Jack Baker, who spent 3 years fully conscious while his body committed atrocities he couldn't prevent. Jack Baker was a good man who spent 3 years fully conscious while his body kidnapped, tortured, mutilated, and murdered potentially hundreds of people. And the scene where you meet the real Jack proves he was aware of every single atrocity the entire time. Jack was a U.S. Marine veteran living in Dulvey, Louisiana with his wife, Marguerite, and son Lucas. In October 2014, Hurricane Roxanne wrecked a cargo ship in the bayou near his property. Jack found a young girl named Eveline and an unconscious woman named Mia in the wreckage. He carried them home. That single act of compassion destroyed his entire family. That night, Eveline's mold infection spread through the household. Jack mutilated himself, slicing open his chest as a sacrifice to Eveline. The mold granted him superhuman regeneration, but placed him under total mental control. Over the next 3 years, Jack kidnapped tourists, travelers, and homeless people who came near the property. Newspaper clippings found in-game document mounting disappearances in the Dulvey area, dozens to potentially hundreds of victims. He tortured them, fed them human remains, dismembered them at the dinner table, turned them into molded creatures. Jack dies repeatedly throughout RE7, shot to pieces in the garage, chainsaw bisected in the dissection room, injected with serum in the boathouse. He regenerates every single time. Even after Eveline's death, his mutation continues. He becomes the Swamp Man, a mindless molded hunted down and killed by his own brother Joe in the end of Zoe DLC. But then you encounter the real Jack inside Eveline's hive mind. When Ethan gets briefly absorbed into the mold network, he meets a kind, sane man who says, I know. I'm not gonna hurt you. Hell, I never would have if I could have helped it. The real Jack Baker explains what happened to his family. Then he begs Ethan with desperation in his voice, free my family, please. That scene confirms Jack was fully conscious for 3 years while his body committed atrocities against his will. He was aware while cannibalizing victims, while chasing Ethan with a shovel, while cutting off limbs and serving them as dinner. He retained his personality, his love for his family, and his horror at his own actions the entire time. And his final fate strips even that away. Reduced to a mindless swamp monster with no memory and no redemption, killed by the brother he once protected. 3 years of being a prisoner in your own body, watching yourself become a monster. 3 years of wanting to stop and having zero control. That's the nightmare Jack Baker lived. But if 3 years of conscious imprisonment seems unbearable, wait until you learn about the man who spent 15 years chained in a basement by his own 12-year-old children, Alexander Ashford. Alexander Ashford spent 15 years chained in a straitjacket in a sealed basement room while workers heard his terrible sounds through the walls. And the recordings he left before his transformation prove he knew exactly what his 12-year-old daughter was going to do to him. Alexander was the 6th Earl Ashford, a geneticist obsessed with restoring his family's reputation within Umbrella Corporation. He created twins, Alexia and Alfred, through Project Code. Veronica, cloning them from the DNA of their ancestor Veronica Ashford. The twins were brilliant. Alexia became Umbrella's chief researcher at age 10. Everything seemed perfect. Alexander had created genius children who would elevate the Ashford name. But then March 1983 arrived. The twins discovered the truth of their unnatural origins. They learned they were clones, and they turned on their father with calculated cruelty. Alexia and Alfred captured Alexander and injected him with Alexia's prototype T. Veronica virus. Without the proper preparation, a 15-year cryogenic incubation period that Alexia later used on herself, the virus mutated Alexander into what she dismissed as a failed experiment. She remarked this was how she dealt with insignificant bugs. Alexia was 12 years old. Alexander transformed into a grotesque creature with 3 tentacle appendages sprouting from his back. His children chained him in a straitjacket and locked him in a sealed room in the Antarctic facility. His intelligence degenerated severely, but fragments of memory and awareness persisted. Workers at the facility could hear sounds through the walls. Terrible sounds. They were too terrified to ever open the door. They nicknamed the unseen horror Nosferatu. For 15 years, Alexander existed in that room. The T. Veronica virus granted immortality through infinite cell replication. He required no food or water. He couldn't die, and he couldn't escape. Workers documented hearing those sounds continuously, suggesting ongoing distress rather than dormancy. 15 years of making noise. 15 years of consciousness degraded just enough that he couldn't communicate, but not enough that suffering stopped. Here's what makes this absolutely devastating. In Darkside Chronicles, chronicles, players found a recorded message Alexander left before his transformation. He expressed fear about what Alexia was planning. He begged whoever found the recording to use the linear launcher, a weapon he specifically designed to stop his daughter. That message sat in the facility for 15 years, until Chris Redfield found it and used the linear launcher to kill Alexia in December 1998. Alexander knew his daughter was going to betray him. He prepared a contingency. Then he spent 15 years chained in darkness, waiting for someone to hear his warning. When Chris finally did, Alexander had been Nosferatu for exactly 15 years and 8 months. His body was recovered after Chris killed him. After everything, he became another Umbrella specimen. But if 15 years of imprisonment by your own children seems like the worst possible fate, wait until you learn about the girl who was 14 when her torture began, and 31 years later still couldn't die.
Lisa Trevor.
Lisa Trevor was 14 years old when Oswell Spencer locked her in a laboratory beneath the mansion her father designed, and 31 years later, when she finally found her mother's skeleton, she recognized it by scent alone. November 10th, 1967. Spencer kidnapped Lisa and her mother Jessica, imprisoning them in the research facility beneath Spencer Mansion. Both women received progenitor virus injections. Jessica's body rejected type A. She died within days. Lisa received type B. Her body fused with it completely. She developed superhuman regeneration and became Umbrella's most valuable test subject, a body that could survive anything they injected into it. Around November 15th, Lisa's mental state shattered. She found a woman she believed was her mother, either the brain-dead Jessica or a researcher sent as an impersonation. Lisa's diary reads, "I found Mom. We ate together. I was very happy. But she was a fake. Not my real mom. Same face, but different inside." Then the entry that defines her entire existence. "I attach her face to me so she doesn't go away." Lisa tore the woman's face off and wore it over her own. For the next 31 years, she ripped faces off female researchers, always searching, always believing the next face might be her mother's. But then Umbrella kept experimenting. From 1967 to 1998, they injected Lisa with every virus and parasite they developed, T-virus strains, progenitor variants. In 1988, the NE alpha parasite that killed every previous host within 5 minutes got implanted into Lisa. Her body absorbed it completely. William Birkin examined the result and discovered something impossible. The absorbed parasite combined with Lisa's mutated cells had created an entirely new viral strain, the G virus. Lisa's 31 years of suffering literally birthed one of the franchise's most devastating bioweapons. By 1978, when Wesker and Birkin transferred to Arklay Lab, Lisa's records were sealed. Researchers called her the woman or bastard. She wasn't recognized as human anymore, just a regenerating body to inject things into. Her diary entries show handwriting deteriorating from teenage script to barely legible marks, but the content never changed. Finding her mother, always finding her mother. In 1995, Umbrella ordered her execution. The USS waited 3 days before declaring her dead. She survived. She lived feral in the Arklay Mountains for 3 more years collecting faces. During the 1998 mansion incident, when Jill or Chris opens Jessica's crypt, Lisa approaches the coffin. After 31 years, she recognizes her mother's remains by scent. She cries out, "Mother." She takes the skull. Then she throws herself into the abyss below. 14 years old when it started, 45 when it ended. 31 years of conscious, immortal suffering, searching for a mother who died in the first week. That's not just the most painful death in Resident Evil. That's the most painful death Capcom has ever written.